Hi, this is Dava Lee with the legislative wrap up for the 2026 legislative session. It's a little longer than usual, but I will try to be as concise as possible. But that's not my middle name. I don't have a middle name. Let's get started. We'll start with a quick session overview. This session, there were over 4,000 bills filed. And in the House, we had 138 on our list that we monitored, give or take. Some we added, some we took out as the session changed. And in the Senate, there were just 74. We opposed 74 bills in the House, 47 in the Senate, supported 41 in the House, and 13 in the Senate. And there were 31 and 13 respectively that we kept watching just to make sure that they weren't amended in some way that we would need to change our position. Of all the bills that we monitored this year, as you can see by this chart, very few actually started moving. And of those that did, only a handful crossed over and even fewer became law. TAFP stands for Truly Agreed to and Finally Passed, which means it will go to the governor for his approval or his veto. I will use that term, TAFP, throughout the rest of this video. Only 9 of those bills crossed the finish line. If you look over at the chart about final position status, you can see that many of the bills that didn't move at all were bills that we supported, not bills we opposed. For the legislative session, we grouped all of the bills into some various categories and looked at what our priorities are. And we divided that into supporting things and opposing things. So anti-DEI bills, anti-LGBTQ bills, anti-trans bills, Parents' Bill of Rights, and school choice and curriculum and accountability, bills that fell into those buckets did not cross the finish line. Public dollars to non-public schools did cross the finish line because the budget added $10 million more for vouchers, and defunding public education also crossed the finish line in the form of HJR 173, which goes on the ballot and will decide if Missouri eliminates the income tax and swaps it for a sales tax, which is going to kill education. And also the actual DESE Foundation formula was not fully funded. So those crossed the finish line. On the legislative priorities that we supported, protecting DEI and diverse curriculum, protecting the LGBTQI plus community, and protecting libraries, none of those things sadly crossed the finish line again this year. Some of the specific bills that we monitored this session very closely, some stalled out, most of them stalled out in various places. House Bill 2862, the Speaks Act, which would protect political speech in the schools, stalled in the Senate. House Bill 1757, which expanded gifted education, stalled in the Senate, but then got added to an omnibus bill that was set to vote today. But that bill, the omnibus bill itself, not the gifted part, but it was part of it, was killed by the Archbishop of St. Louis this morning. And so that bill died. Therefore, the expansion of gifted education died with it. House Bill 2536 was gendered facilities. House Bill 2710, A-to-F accountability, also stalled. Those stalled in the Senate. Senate Bill 1002 looked like it was going to stall out, but then today, with a lot of drama in the House, actually was TAFP'd. It was truly agreed to and finally passed after it wasn't. The first vote was defeated, and then they did a motion to reconsider, and it won by two votes. So it will go to the governor. Senate Bill 1652, protecting African American women and girls through the Phoenix Alert, stalled in the House. It got further than it's ever gotten, but it still stalled. 2426, the Parents' Bill of Rights, was defeated on the House floor before it crossed over. And then the other bills just flat stalled out in the committees, except for House Bill 905, Missouri Rangers, which was TAFP, that puts more guns in schools with more training, but also they can use lethal ammunition. And House HR 173, the income tax swap, which we've already talked about. This is a list of the bills that we monitored that crossed the finish line. This is the most bills that have crossed the finish line since we've been at MOWEEP, but also nothing that was really dreadful, except for 1002 crossed the finish line. 2061 was a bill we monitored and went back and forth on depending upon the various versions and the wording of it. But ultimately, we reached out to our members to find out if they wanted us to pursue action once it got TAFP'd, and everyone said no. That's the anti-Semitism bill. We've talked about HJR 173, the MSHA bill. Finally, at the end, MSHA was okay with the bill, but we still believed in local control. House Bills 2002, 2003, and 2012 were the formulas, the funding bills that we've already talked about. We still opposed the higher education and workforce development bill because it retained anti-DEI language in it, and we stayed firm on our opposition to that. 905, the Missouri Rangers bill, we're not in favor of more guns in schools. And then 999, the Born Alive bill, was a bill that we weighed in on behalf of a partner organization. And then today, as we've said, House Bill 1002, the St. Charles Board of Elections in November bill, passed, like I said, with a lot of drama. It was the worst roller coaster ride ever. 0 out of 10 would not recommend. Of course, the way bills move across through the process is by elected leaders voting in committees, voting on the House floor, voting on conference committees. We tracked all of the votes on the bills that we were monitoring closely. And 100% alignment was achieved by only 3 elected leaders: Representative Ely, Senator Patty Lewis, and Senator Tracy McCreary. They aligned with our position 100% of the time on the votes. A large list of people aligned at 90%, and that's on the slide. 80% or better is a really good average, because sometimes committee votes you can vote against something in committee, but vote for it on the floor, or vice versa, to move things through. There was nobody that voted against us 100% of the time. There were a few surprises. Uh, Representative Terry had a lower average. She voted against Moe's position more this term than she did last term. Senator May, for the first time in a long time, had a lower voting average for us as well. And Senator Moon, one of the most conservative senators in the Senate, aligned with Moe's position over 80% of the time. We're not sure if it's because he agreed with us or because he was disagreeing with some procedure on a bill, but a vote's a vote. And so he was at over 80%. The overall averages broke out along party lines, which is not really a big surprise. And they look a lot lower than you would think they would be, but that's because there are so many more Republicans than there are Democrats, and the Republicans' voting averages are far lower than they are than the Democrats are. So that's why those averages look low. This slide kind of breaks down the voting by category: education, DEI, funding, or other. One of those things that didn't fit squarely in those categories, or bills that we followed or took an interest in because partner organizations asked us to weigh in and engage in a call to action. And it breaks it down by House and also by party. So you can see that pretty clearly here. What kind of difference did MOEP make in this session? Well, let's take a look. While it seemed like there were fewer hearings and things on bills that we followed this session, we still got a lot done in Jefferson City. We attended one rally. We went to Jefferson City 8 weeks and spent 11 days down there attending and or testifying at hearings. We put out 56 testimony opportunities through the online system, and 5,086 witnesses went on the record on all the bills that we followed. And of that, 4,072 witnesses share our position. So that tells us that we are, in fact, on the side of the angels. And MOEP alone, just our MOEP members, were responsible for 1,590 different, separate, unique contacts with elected leaders. So that is something that we can put in the win column. If you've been following MOEP for a minute, you know that your friendly neighborhood PAL team leader likes data and charts. And so when it comes to on the record testimony, one of our most effective tools in dealing in getting our voices heard, you can see that in the bills that we followed, MOWEEP provided over 10% of the total testimony on all of the bills that we filed and all of the thousands and thousands of submissions. We had 10% of those, which is a really good number for an organization that is still kind of growing. And when it comes to our testimony, 80% of the time we were in the majority. We held the majority opinion, which again says that we're on the side of the angels. And if you look at it from a standpoint of how much testimony did MOWEEP provide on every single bill that we put out, you can see that there were times that we were the only ones that weighed in on the bill. It was 100%. And we provided a significant amount of testimony on almost every single bill that we thought we needed testimony for. So, once again, well done to all of our members.
It's always nice to look back where we started to see how far we've come. And MOWEEP started in 2022, but we really didn't have good data until 2023 because we were kind of building the plane while we were flying it in 2022. But over the last 4 sessions, we've had some pretty rock solid data. And you can see that we have grown. From our first year to our current year, we have grown leaps and bounds. This year, it may look like we haven't grown quite as much because our off the record engagement through contacting people through Every Action was lower, not because we didn't contact people, but we didn't have the opportunities to do that because of where the bills landed. We did a lot more House testimony this time and a lot of more in-person testimony in the Senate. And when more bills are in the Senate, then that means people have to travel, and that happens less often. But we are still growing strong, thanks to you.
I've always said that if Jerry Springer can have final thoughts, then so can I. So let's think about what we can do going forward. And on this screen, there are just some shots of things that MOWEEP has done, the rallies we attended, the testimony that we gave, and our engagement with our partners. You didn't think I was going to let everybody go without some calls to action, did you? Encourage 5 friends or more to join MOWEEP at MissouriEquity.com. And on that same website, you can click the donate button and donate to our cause. This summer, work, work, work to flip the House and Senate seats. We need to break the supermajority if we want any hope of getting things done. And this session gave us some hope because a lot of times some of those bills barely passed as it is. So you need to vote like your life depends on it because in some ways it does. And please check out MOWEEP on Facebook. Use the time between sessions to renew yourselves and ready yourselves so we can resist some of the really terrible things that are coming down the pike and we can reclaim the Constitution, both United States and Missouri constitutions, for the people because the people have the power. The work continues. Stay engaged. Raise your voice. And I've always said many voices make light work. And that's why I chose these things about voices. But the last one is very personal to me. It comes from one of my students who came from a culture where women were not allowed to go to school, where women and girls have to stay silent when the men are speaking. And this young woman had been trying to tell her male classmates that they could win this competition if they would just do what she suggested, and they told her to be quiet. And she stomped her foot, put her hands on her hips, and said, "Listen to the women's, we know things." And she was right. Sometimes the people they think should have the quietest voice really know what we're talking about, and so that just means we need to be louder and more persistent. Thank you, thank you, thank you from MOWEEP, from the PAL team, and from me personally. I will say once again, thank you for raising your voice, for submitting testimony, for putting your hands on your hips and stomping your feet and saying, "Listen to us. We know things." Thank you from the bottom of our hearts.